Okay. Okay, good evening, all. I'm just going to turn the music down. It's nice, but yeah. Okay, so welcome everybody. I just got one earphone in so I can monitor things a bit. Actually, I'm going to take it out because there's a delay, but when Dan and I are talking, I just want to make sure there's no echo. Yeah, so good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining. Those of you that are online and able to join, welcome. We've got, something different for tonight, this episode. I've been fortunate to have a guest, and he'll be joining us in just a sec. Dan Patterson from Northern Rivers Workplace Health and Safety. So anyway, let's get going right off the bat so that we can, get things rolling here. Just give me 1 second to bring everything up. There we go. Now we're ready to roll. Okay, so what I've titled this is Safety Up, Over, and Down Under, because we're going to talk about things on our side of the world. And I guess it's all with perception. We feel that we're on the top of the world up here in the northern and western hemisphere, but I'm pretty sure Australians also feel like they're on top of the world too as well on their end. I was in Australia quite a few years ago. 1982, actually. So yeah, a long time ago. Interesting place. And, but Dan reached out to me and I had the opportunity to talk with him quite a bit, and looking forward to talking about safety and safety culture and doing sort of like a comparison between the two areas. So let's first off hit and talk about the chat rules. Okay. Most of you, if you've been joining this live stream before, you've joined it before, you're very familiar with them. And those of you that haven't, well, this might be new to you, but please participate. If you're in the chat, introduce yourself, where you're from, who you are, what you do. Introductions are nice, especially for me, knowing who's online and who's listening. But hey, if you're a shy wallflower and you want to just hide out in the shadows, that's fine too. But if you do decide to speak up and enter into the chat, maybe introduce yourself real quick. Go ahead and ask and answer, especially today when we have like a guest speaker on. Your knowledge, your opinions count, your questions count, by all means. But the number one rule is, of course, be civil. No name calling, no insults. None of us popped out of the womb knowing everything. Okay? So we all have to start somewhere, and sometimes questions that people ask might seem, a slam dunk for the rest of us. But really and truthfully, they're not. Oh, okay. Well, you know what, Sam, by all means, we'll get to that because we're going to have a Q&A towards the end. So by all means, yes, we'll be answering your questions as we come to it. So just hang around, because we've got an interesting program planned for this evening. The other thing, of course, is this is not professional advice, any of it. Okay, there's no contracts being signed, no money changing hands, nothing else like this. So really and truthfully, we're here just to create a community, compare notes, and talk and share things. So, as I said, I've been working on some idea of some guest spots. Dan's come in to talk, and we'll be talking with Dan shortly. I'm also going to have in 2 weeks an HR professional that I've worked with in the past, going to come in and talk about bullying and harassment, the effects on the safety culture, but also to the some of the nuances with investigating and dealing with it. And one of the things I am working on, actually two of them, one of them is a conflict resolution specialist, and then a person who's a retired police officer, and maybe sharing with us what you can expect if you have that collaboration or that unfortunate circumstance that some might see as something serious happening on their work site. And across Canada, we are almost obligated to work with law enforcement if there's been a fatality, especially if there's accusations of negligence and so forth. Okay, so some of what I'm working on, and that's what's coming up. Anyway, what I want to do is I'm going to bring Dan into the mix here, and there he is right there. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining us this evening.
No worries. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. So, as I said, once again, Dan is a workplace, he's actually a certified workplace health and safety officer in Australia. And I'm going to let him tell you more about himself in just a sec. Just a couple of things. If we're talking about something and you have a question, as soon as we've sort of had a segue away from that subject, we'll address the question in the chat. And Assam, we will likely be telling you about safety plans and safety programs from both our points of view when it comes time to the Q&A. So anyway, I'm going to just say that Dan reached out to me a little over a month ago now, and we've had some challenges between time zones, putting everything together and sorting out the technology and whatnot. But I wanted to jump at the chance of collaborating and just being able to compare notes. And not sure, we may look at making this something that happens every once in a while going down the road. But I'm just happy to welcome Dan. And we want to talk about continuing on in the notion of the safety culture series, just about safety culture, but also comparison between us and the land down under. So go ahead, Dan. I'll let you take it away.
All right. So, as Kevin introduced me, I'm Daniel Patterson, or Dan Patterson, and I started off life basically doing blue collar work, my boiler making apprenticeship, that sort of thing. Then I went into the emergency services, where I spent the better part of my adulthood, and then back to blue collar work, driving trucks, and then into work health and safety, which is where I still am to this day.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo with you, Dan. So what I'm going to do is when you're talking, I'm just going to hit my mute on my mic. Okay, I'll just work with that for now, and then we'll go from there. Actually, I'm going to just try another thing here. What? It's the only problem. That's why everybody wears earphones when they monitor their live streams. But anyway, Dan, let's talk about. Why don't you give me some history of OHS in Australia?
Yeah. So, as you and I actually discussed off camera before, health and safety is very, very new to Australia. It only really goes back to the 1980s, and it started in 1983 in the state of New South Wales, where I primarily practice. And the legislation is so outdated that it even had to include things like you have to include women as part of your safety boards. Then from there, we realized that legislation was quite outdated. It didn't really do anything. It only made it an offence to not ensure safety in a workplace, and that was punishable by a $50,000 fine, which in today's money is about $180,000 if you killed a worker. So then we brought in the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 2000, which once again didn't do a great job. It brought in a duty to consult with workers, which was good. That means that a workplace must now talk with its workers before it makes any changes to health and safety policies. But once again, it had really, really minor penalties. I think the worst penalty under that law was about $1.5 million if you killed a worker, and no prison time at all. And then we, in 2012, got the Work Health and Safety Act 2011, which is the current one nationwide in every state and territory except for Victoria. They're the only state that are still doing their own thing. But for everyone else, they're still all under the same law. It doesn't matter what state or territory you're in, except for Victoria. If I've been trained in New South Wales, I can tell you exactly what the law is in Western Australia because it's the same. It's all harmonised now. And next year, New South Wales will actually be creating industrial manslaughter offences to catch up with the rest of the country, where you will face up to 20 or 25 years imprisonment or a fine of up to $11 million for a workplace fatality.
Wow. So just a question then on that note, does it make it difficult when you go to, say, if you were to do work in, and you said Victoria?
Yeah, Victoria is the state that's exempt.
Yeah. So does it make it difficult for you, or do you do much in that aspect, or do you just mainly stay in close to New South Wales and Queensland?
I won't do Victoria because I'm just not a specialist. I don't have enough knowledge about how things work down there and how different their laws might be. The concepts are the same, but it's more so the difficulty of trying to navigate with legislation you're not familiar with. So, no, I just don't do Victoria. They've got their own safety people. They've got WorkSafe Victoria that
Mm-hmm.
do that for them. And that's it. I just do mainly Queensland, New South Wales, and a few projects in Western Australia.
Cool. Well, I might as well get on to the next question that, as far as safety culture goes, what do you see as the current safety culture in Australian industries? Like, is it apathetic? Is it progressive? Meeting in the middle? Where is it?
It really does depend on, like anything in the world, where you go. So just last night, I was out at the raceway in Lismore and I met a builder out there who's really, really safety conscious, has never been in trouble with safety regulators, and 100% will be the type of person to call the regulators to check his work before he does it. But then there's also builders around here who just tie a rope around an apprentice's waist and hope for the best. So it really does depend on where we go. I would say once they reach that medium-sized company, they take it very seriously. But I see with small companies, they just don't care because they don't understand the ramifications for them. And also, once they get to the big multinational style company, they usually think they're untouchable and just stop caring as well.
Wow. Wow. Um, yeah. Well, I'd like to say that we're not that bad in Canada. And to the viewers, I just apologize. There's a video glitching once in a while, and I'm not sure. I just think between all of the different technology, maybe I'm just throttling the computer a little hard. But anyway, um, uh, I'd like to say it doesn't happen in Canada, but you can often see in the news where we have workers that are killed for absolutely terrible negligence, whether it be working without fall protection, working at heights, not checking for hazards, or not orienting workers properly, whatever the case may be. Like it's phenomenal what we still see. So I guess is it safe to say that it's polarized where it is? Like you have people that are very progressive as far as health and safety goes on one end of the spectrum, and then on the other, you have people who I don't know if they don't care or just don't know. Is it safe to say that you're the same way as us?
It'd be definitely a 50-50 between don't know and don't care. Some people do know better and they just simply don't care. So there's some builders out west that I'm currently working with to try and explain to them, okay, you might not care, but do you want to risk the next 20 years in prison not caring? So
Oh, yeah, good point.
that's where uh, that one's a tough nut to crack, really. But then the majority of people, I think prosecutions are a bad idea for them. So we see a lot of what we call Section 38 prosecutions, which is prosecutions for not reporting work health and safety offences to the regulator. And personally, I don't think they do anyone any good, because in almost all of those cases, there's no malice or ill will. They just didn't know they had to report it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. And a fellow just joined the stream. Gregor, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. From the UK, he obtained his NEBOSH general certificate, works in safety for 6 years. He's now in Western Australia, planning to work. He's got 10 plus years in the safety industry. So there you go.
So I just saw that one too. He's got his Cert 4 Work Health and Safety, and he's going for his diploma. Gregor, we'll do a bit more in the Q&A, but definitely there's other courses. I just need to learn more about what you want to do. So if you want to go down the auditing path, there's definitely diplomas to go and do there. If you want to be more like what I do, the investigation, the policy writing, there's legal qualifications and government investigation qualifications I'd recommend. But we'll save that, I think, for the Q&A.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, wow, my ever glitching. It's terrible. Anyway, just check my connections. Maybe I'm not plugged in quite well enough or something. There we go. Anyway, yeah, great. So, now, do you see it trending up to improving in the industry right now? And I'll explain some background. I've had a lot of conversations with safety professionals in quite a few different industries, but maybe the heavier ones like civil construction. I don't know how you differentiate it there in Australia. Civil construction is road building and sewer pipeline, things like that. Whereas commercial construction, building buildings, residential construction, houses. But all three industries, they were seeing a trend upward, but now with an increase both in immigration and worldwide inflation, it seems like people are, they're seeing a trend downwards. And they're seeing where things were leveled off, now they're seeing a lot of not necessarily apathy, but total disregard for a lot of things, like people not bothering with tow boards on scaffolds, or stepping over a guardrail at a height to get a better reach, or crawling under a guardrail and things like that, these sort of things. So are you seeing that now, Dan, as comparison to maybe a year ago?
Not so much in construction, definitely in transport, but not so much in the construction sector. So in Australia, we've got 3 types of construction, basically. We've got residential, building homes; civil, same as you, building utilities for a town, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And commercial for us would be building shopping centres, corporate offices, that sort of thing. And now in those industries, I've seen a lot of improvement, especially over the past couple of years that I've been actually looking for it. And they are pretty good, because they know the regulators will come out a lot more often. They know that they will be getting fines, and that has kept them all following the rules. But transport, both through immigration and just desperation, because everywhere in Australia during COVID suffered massive redundancies, loss of workers, basically attrition in the transport sector. And now companies are that desperate to get the job done, they don't really care what corners they're willing to cut. That's not true for everyone. There are still some really good truck companies out there. But all you need to do is look at a map of Australia. We're big. It means that our trucks have to go a long, long way. Much like Canada, you've got truck drivers that drive massive distances. And when they start cutting corners, well, yeah, the outcome is less than ideal.
Yeah, especially when they are flying down the highway at 100 kilometers an hour and have 50,000 pounds behind them. Yeah, Absolutely. And see, that's one of the things. Most transportation here is intermodal. So what that means is because it travels over borders, it's federally regulated and falls under what we call the CLC2, the Canada Labor Code Part 2.
Mhm.
And so no provincial jurisdiction. It's still something safety professionals have to know about and understand. But yeah, once again, it's another ball of wax, shall we say.
Well, ours is both. We have the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. They regulate transport in every state and territory except the Northern Territory and Western Australia. And then we also have work health and safety people like me in each state and territory. So the easiest way I look at it is when it comes to loading, unloading, and the actual management of the driver, that's a work health and safety problem. Anything else, like the maintenance of trucks, the weights that are being put on trucks, how loads are processed, that becomes more an NHVR issue. And for smaller businesses, they'll retain people like me, and I'm expected to do both of them for them to deal with the NHVR thing and the work health and safety side of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that happens a lot to hear when people join a trucking company as a safety professional or go in and do consulting. You have to kind of wear both hats. And like anything else, you know yourself, whenever you're trying to wear both hats, one of them invariably falls off.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so here's another one just to think about. Have you seen external influences such as changes in government, post pandemic issues, inflation, economic issues, etc.? Have you seen them affecting health and safety?
We've had a very big change in government recently from spending about a decade, over a decade, with the party called the Liberal Party in charge. And I don't like to make things political, but it is just a hard, true fact, sadly. Liberal
Mm-hmm.
Party will prioritise things like putting fines in place, and the Labor Party go, well, no, you can't replace a worker's life. If you kill them, you go to prison. And because we've just had that change, that's why we're about to start seeing prison sentences for killing workers.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm on board with that. I think that's a good deterrent, personally. But there will be an element of recklessness that needs to be proven before that can happen. So there's been a very big political change with work health and safety in the past year, but more so the impacts from the COVID lockdowns and that sort of thing. There's definitely been a sort of mini recession where people aren't willing to spend money on things like safety consultants, or they're not willing
Mm-hmm.
to spend money on things like scaffolding or guardrails, that sort of thing. They'd rather wing it and hope for the best. So,
Yeah. And it was funny as we saw, not funny, notable. There's what I'd likely say. But as we saw the pandemic ramping up, I saw a lot of plain, simple health and safety things starting to go by the wayside in favor of things like masks and vaccines and whatnot. Like the amount of times that I would see, and partly because I think people were sequestered in their homes, there was very little travel, wasn't a lot happening. That um, uh, there's a lot being ignored because I would literally see people walking along the edge of a building or standing on the edge of the building, squatting down, facing inward in the building with their back towards the edge. And um, to me, it was preposterous. And it took a while to level out after the pandemic. Now the focus is away on that and more actually back to traditional safety. But my fear is in Alberta, like I honestly love our new premier. I think she's excellent. But my fear is some of the cowboy attitude in 1960s and 70s attitude towards safety may start to creep in again. And that's my concern. I think we're in a good place now. personally as a province. I don't know. How are things in Ontario with there, Dave? If you're still there, it's uh, I just like I said, I find that when certain things are in the forefront on the news, sometimes it takes away the attention from health and safety, and it's almost like a distraction at times. I don't know if you experience that in Australia, but I know that we do here in Canada.
Sadly, I'd be the wrong one to ask there because I don't even own a TV. So, uh,
Well, I don't watch mine. That's the thing. I
yeah,
whatever news I get is what pops up on my phone or tablet. I I use my TV to watch YouTube or to uh, as another monitor. I'm terrible. I yeah. Somebody asked me the other day, "Did you watch the news?" No. Yeah.
it's that's the thing. We don't get a lot of reporting on work health and safety incidents. That's why on my own company's website, I take the time to report on all work health and safety prosecutions because you can even Google half of them, and half of them haven't even hit some online local newspaper. There's just very little coverage of them.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. And so David said in Ontario during the pandemic, things kind of fell off the radar with inspections, but they eventually did a mass hire for inspectors. And yes, I remember reading that in the news. We're fortunate, like a lot of stuff does hit the news here. But as I reported on the last live stream, sometimes the investigations get done in the media, which I find is absolutely distasteful and a detriment, really, when you get right down to it.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I one of the issues that I find is with the media is that. But we're fortunate, like all of our authorities do publish things on their respective websites, so you can go on. You can. But usually, what happens when they're on an OHS authority website, that means the investigation's already been done, cleared, so it's already off the news radar. But one thing for viewers, what I'll do is after we're done here, I'll put Dan's LinkedIn profile and Northern River's website in the description so that you guys will be able to see. Yeah. Okay, and Gregor answered you, Dan, and I'll ask you a question while you're typing.
I know, just so I can have a think before we get to the Q&A, what sort of courses, because there's definitely a lot for mining that you need to get done in Australia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you talked about it. Like, what do you find? Like, you talked about the oh, and here I'm at a loss for words. Deterrent for um working unsafely in the industry. But let's get back to safety culture and what do you see as find as some of the detriments within organizations that you've noticed that affects their corporate safety culture in Australia?
The thing is that a lot of the bigger corporations, the multinationals, they stick to the old KPI system. They are
Mm-hmm.
just interested in the efficiency of something. Now, doing something efficiently, as you know just as well as I do, if not better, does not make it safe at all.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I was a boilermaker. I can do really, really efficient welds. They are not safe at all and will probably fail, but they'll be efficient.
Yeah.
It's yep. So that's the thing. I look at that as a poor safety culture. Any agency that uses KPIs, I sort of start to think of it as a poor safety culture agency, unless they are measured out with also a safety marker for that KPI.
Mm-hmm.
Is a way that I've seen that sort of balance out. But yes, safety cultures with big organizations can be poor because I won't mention any names on the live stream. Let's be friendly with everyone. But there are companies at the moment who are all going about report bullying. Everyone deserves to be respected at the workplace. Yeah, well, that's because they're currently getting sued for sexually harassing a bunch of their staff. So
Hmm.
it seems to be a matter of safety, and all of that is important when they're trying to effectively negate any negative media they're about to get. Now, that's
Oh.
not every. That wouldn't be fair to say about everyone, but that's a
Mm.
lot of the big companies in Australia. Is it's only important when it can grab attention to keep people distracted from other stuff. It's
And it's funny you mention that because it's also some of what I talked about on the last stream was exactly that. KPIs, we have X number of accident free days. We have,
I remember that. Yeah.
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 And I've seen some like when they want to get rid of that and so many days operating without loss and things like that. And it's like, well, okay, and so I find those sort of things don't boost a safety culture. In fact, they actually are to its detriment because you have workers who will be not reporting incidents, especially if they're close calls or near misses, because they don't want to be the ones that drive that safety culture or that safety record down. And a lot of times, too, these things are also tied to management, senior management, and executive bonuses, too.
Yeah, and I think I even put a comment on that one while you were streaming that we had a company, particularly their Byron Bay branch, that was paying bonuses for not reporting incidents.
Yeah.
And yes, they also did have an incident where they were dismissing staff for reporting incidents. So that one hasn't gone before prosecution, so I won't be naming and shaming, but yeah, that
Yeah.
one's a. So yes, that one does just show that sometimes these companies don't actually have a really good safety culture just because they have zero accidents that year. Any company that comes to me in the blue collar sector and says we've had zero accidents, I ask, okay, how many people have you intimidated into not reporting?
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm.
Or how many people are not reporting so they can all have that company picnic and they don't want to be the one that screws up the company picnic or the barbecue or the new jacket for winter or whatever the case may be. And I've seen it time and time again whenever you try to give these extrinsic bonuses, gifts, gratuities, whatever, as an effort to increase safety, all it does is trash a safety culture.
Yep, that's the thing. You can't penalize people for reporting safety. In my opinion, you need to penalize the management for not having this place be safe to begin with.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but that never happens, sadly. It's I've seen a few companies try to do that, but managers at those companies have always pushed back, going, "We shouldn't be punished because boots on ground workers have accidents." But I mean, we've just had one which I can talk about because their prosecution's now finalised. BSA, do you have Foxtel in Canada?
Foxtail, not sure. Maybe, not sure.
Basically, they're a cable provider, that sort of
Mm,
thing.
no.
Uh, BSA is the company that runs all the lines for them. As in, if you want cable connected to your house in Australia, they're the ones that come and connect it for you. Now, sadly, a young worker, and I won't name anything because the saddest part here was his dad's also the safety manager for this company. Uh, he went under a house in Sydney and cut a wire. It was still live,
Oh.
and we're 240 volts here in Australia, so he died. And at no point was any risk assessment done for going under houses cutting wires. At no point was there a procedure for lockout, tagout, or anything like that. And BSA copped some nominal fine, and uh, they still get to continue operating to this day when they are such a big company. They are a really, really big company here in Australia. And yet, at no point did this company seemed to think it was necessary to have this sort of training given to workers to lock out, tag out, to test for whether a wire was live or not before they cut it. And they just said, oh, well, this is how we do it. We flick the power off at the fuse box, and then we just cut the wire. So, yes, that's one of those ridiculous parts where the companies themselves need to be held accountable for not creating that safety culture, for not actually implementing the right training, instruction, supervision.
Yeah. Well, and so we had something in Canada passed quite some time ago. We called it the Westray Act. And basically, what it says, it doesn't matter all the way up to the CEO. You don't get to say, I don't know what happens with the boots on the ground. I don't get to know that. So you are liable for prosecution, criminal penalties, etc. However, it doesn't often, the cases where it's small companies, and you may hear about the president, and you find out he's the president of 12 people, um, spends a bit of time in jail or what have you. But yeah, the level of prosecution isn't as much as you would think. I was told when I was in a position once that your job is to keep the president out of jail. And I said, no, my job is to ensure that the workers are safe and that the corporate brand is not sullied. If the president wants to put himself in jail, there's nothing I can do about that.
And we've got a similar thing that is not well prosecuted, but we do have a duty under the law under Section 27 of the Harmonised Act, which is the duty of officers of corporations. They have to effectively do due diligence, become
Mm-hmm.
aware of the safety processes and that sort of thing. And then part of that due diligence might include engaging someone like myself or a work health and safety officer to come and explain to them their obligations, what's going on in their workplace, what do we actually find that the workers are doing? Are they following the company policies? So that's their duty. And same sort of thing. It's probably going to be very interesting to watch over the next few years how many of these CEOs, COOs, directors of units, that sort of thing go before the courts. But it's not been a common occurrence so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we have the laws on the books. It's just like with big corporations, you just don't see it happening very much. Or what you see is they're well insulated enough that it's the foreman or senior manager or whatever ends up going to jail. Um, and rightly so, a couple of cases, like there was a case in Ontario where swing stage fell, killed workers, and it was horrible all around. But the foreman was forcing them to go on when they shouldn't have, and forcing too many workers onto the swing stage. So, yeah, by rights, he did deserve to go to jail. But and just see something safety personal or safety personnel. We will be doing a Q&A at the end here. So yes, we'll look at your question and give you some tips on how to elevate your safety career from both of us. Okay, so we've talked about like detriments within the organization and those things that attack a safety culture, and of course, chasing profit is the big one. What do you see as some of the positive internal influences?
A lot of the positive ones really do come down to the type of leader you've got. So, as we should all know by now, managers are not always leaders, and leaders aren't always put in the position of a manager.
Yeah.
There are really good leaders in a lot of workplaces that I go and do work with, and they aren't in management positions. They're boots on the ground positions. And I'd love to see them go up into management eventually. So these are the positive parts I'm seeing, that workers are starting to, I'll keep it all Canadian friendly and I won't use Australian expressions here,
That's
but
okay.
they're getting confidence. Okay, fine. They're growing a set of nuts.
Yeah.
They're actually getting confidence. They're willing to actually stand up to their boss and go, no, this is unsafe. We're not doing this. It's
Do you
so
have a right to refuse there?
sorry.
Do you have a right to refuse? Like, do you have right to
Yes,
refuse dangerous work legislation?
I'm pretty sure it's in our section 80s. It's that you have the right to cease unsafe work. Here we go. I've just looked it up here. Yep, it is section 84 of the Harmonised Act. Section 84 does give a worker the right to cease unsafe work, and either the company needs to make their work safe before they go back to it, or find them alternative work to do.
Hmm. Interesting.
And
Good stuff.
yep, so there's also a penalty under section 104, I'm pretty sure, to terminate a worker for refusing to do unsafe work. So that becomes a
Mm,
crime to do
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and
So,
we have that here as we have that's a foundational element across all of the legislation across Canada. Every worker has the right to refuse dangerous or, depending on the province you're in, unsafe work. And there's a process usually outlined in some guide or guideline for that piece. But there's also uh, a deterrent there within that same legislation that doesn't allow uh, employers or employer designates, in other words, managers and supervisors, to punish a worker.
yeah, I've
Yeah,
just
that's right, David. That's what he said. It's the version of the Harmonized Act. It's the version of the Health and Safety Act across Australia, with the exception of the state of Victoria.
yep, spot on. So I just did the maths. In Australia, if you punish a worker for refusing to do unsafe work, the fine for a company is $634,700.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so big fine to pay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like it's very difficult for us to do the calculate the fines because you have administrative penalties and you have, and I'm at a loss for you have like the administrative penalty, then you have the victim surcharges, you have the and there's three or four other surcharges that they can pile onto it as well. So it's very difficult for us to calculate fines. We have absolutely no idea when it comes right down to it.
Oh, that's the thing. We know what the maximum fine is, so that's six hundred
Yeah.
thirty-four thousand. It's if you plead guilty in Australia, you get 25% off your fine just for pleading guilty. So the actual maximum, yeah. See what a convict colony we are. Just if you own up and tell us the truth, we'll give you a discount. It's, so yes, you get $476,000 is now your new maximum if you plead guilty straight away.
Oh, well, right
So
on. Throw yourself on your sword and hope for the best. Mercy of the courts.
it's
Yeah.
very
Well, so
rare
then we
he's
have
not guilty.
yeah, we have a maximum here, but it's per offense too. So, and I believe it's now up to 565,000 or 567,000 per offense. But I would have to look. I can't recall the last time I've looked, so it's been a year or two. Usually goes up every year. Adjusted for inflation, I guess. Yeah. And that's what I see as positive internal influences here. And that's why, like, my closing line is usually is it's all about being a leader. You don't have to be a manager, supervisor, a safety professional, or anything. All you have to do is want to do the right thing at the right time in the right place and lead by example, step up and lead by example, provoke safety. That's why I named the channel what it is we have to provoke safety with others.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've got a um, leadership to me is very much the opposite of management. Management is about protecting you and the people above you. Leadership is about protecting your team.
That's right.
And yeah, that's where I've got a lot more time for the leaders in a workplace. And a lot of my clients sometimes do get offended by that, but I tell them if they want more of my time, be more of a leader. Because I'll spend more time talking to who I've identified as the leaders of a workplace that might not necessarily be the CEO of a workplace.
Absolutely. Simon Sinek said it the best. He said that what happens is people can do a job really well. and then they elevate them to manager or supervisor, whatever the case may be. And because they did the job really well, they don't necessarily know anything about leading, but what they do know is to tell people how to do the job that they did it that way. And doesn't necessarily make a leader. And I like what you said, where there's managers that aren't necessarily leaders, and there's people that aren't managers but are very good leaders. And then I think it was Dwight D. Eisenhower that said it. He says, "I don't lead, I compel others to follow." And a lot of times, doing that right thing at the right time, being that guy that says, "No, I'm not going up there unless there's fall protection." Or, "Hold on, I'm going to inspect my harness before I put it on. I'm also going to inspect it when I take it off. I'm going to do that pre-use inspection of the step ladder before I use it. I'm going to have a quick look at it, maybe tag it out of service after I'm done, etc." But unfortunately, those people are few and far between, but I do see it changing too.
Oh, that's good. That's one thing I'd like to see in not even my lifetime. I'd like to see it in the next 10 or so years, and I hope that's not my lifetime, is the whole change where we do have a lot more people willing to stand up for very hard-earned rights. Well, like I said, our work health and safety laws aren't that new. They date back to 1983. And in 1983, it was basically just a small fine for a boss to kill you. Now we've actually progressed further and further and further. A lot of politicians who have actually got some good morals behind them have now fought to bring in laws where you can go to prison for killing workers. And these laws are useless, though, if people don't start standing up and enforcing them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly it. Like it's great to have all of these laws on paper, but unless you're actually going to enact them and use them and make them stick, it's all for nothing, right?
Mm.
Platitudes don't save lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess maybe as we start wrapping up heading towards the Q&A, is what tips do you have for up and coming safety professionals? If people were to ask you, what do I do to, and these are some of the questions we've got, and maybe it might answer some of them, but what tips do you have?
The one bit I'd give is probably not one that a lot of people would want to hear, but health and safety can't be your first job. It, to me, at least, does not work. You need to go out into the real world, get some experience, and then you'll understand things a lot better. You'll be able to make them click a lot better. Because that's something I've noticed with a lot of people going into university here in Australia and going and doing a Bachelor of Work Health and Safety, and then wondering why they can't get work. And they go, well, that's the thing, I don't have a Bachelor of Work Health and Safety. I've got vocational, Cert 4, diploma, doing advanced diploma, that sort of thing. And that works a lot better because I've also got industry background in a lot of the fields that I go and work in. So I know right from wrong from having done the job. So to me, I would say go and actually get a job, get some experience in the world, and then go and work in health and safety first.
Mm-hmm.
That's, work in health and safety second, I should say. I just don't think it works. I've got some people that do just try to come straight out of the woodwork into work health and safety, and it never ever works.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I send them to a building site, they're going to get eaten alive when the tradies start standing up to them. But I've been a tradie myself, and I can give it back twice as hard. So, yeah, that's
well, exactly. It was funny. And in almost every safety job I've had, I end up having to do the same thing, Dan. I have to start by explaining my background and I've had people treat me like an absolute doofus. Well, Kevin, this is a loader, and you know what? Like, it runs with what we call diesel. Okay. Just to save you a bit of time, if you want, I understand it. It's a 930. It's an old C, and I used to run them in the bush when I worked as a logger. In fact, you want me to get on it and show you? Um, oh, so you know what you're talking about. You know your way around iron. Yes, I do. So let's just talk about the fact that you're running it with cracked bosses around the main lift cylinders.
Yeah.
And oh, okay. So um, uh, things tend to change, but that's one of the things I found. But fortunately, like you, I spent time actually in industry. Um, my background was, of course, I was a logger, and then I also worked in civil construction, road building. So I spent a lot of time around equipment. And but then I've also done my share of time around residential and commercial construction. So I have a varied background. Um, but exactly like you said, without knowing any of that stuff first, like, because I don't know what you call them here, but when we block up scaffolding on uneven ground and everything, we call it mud sills. And but if I didn't know anything, and somebody is explaining, somebody didn't have their scaffold blocked up properly, or the mud sills properly to even things out, I wouldn't know what to say. Or if somebody said, "Well, Kevin, go check that scaffold for the mud sills," I wouldn't know what to look at. And so you're right. Spending time in industry, safety can't be your first job.
Well, that's the thing. I was out doing an inspection with a company's own internal work health and safety person, and this person was all of about 20, which I think is great. Getting into an industry young, get interested in it young is fantastic. But this person was straight out of university with a Bachelor of Work Health and Safety, or Occupational Health and Safety, I think their degree read. And then I'm walking around the site with them, having to explain to them what a kickboard is
Yeah.
and how this is or isn't relevant to Australian standards. So I said, "That's a breach." And he said, "No, it's not, because this bit of paper." I said, "Yep, welcome to the real world. The bit of paper might say, yes, it is compliant with Australian standard, whatever the Australian standard he was mentioning for erecting scaffolding outside of a structure. Fine, it ticks that box. But what's to stop a worker kicking a hammer off there and it landing on my head?" He said, "Oh, nothing." "So are they managing their risk of falls?" "No." "So how do we control that?" "Let's put a kickboard in place." Done. Yeah. And that's where you do need that
Yeah, we call
background.
them toe boards.
Yeah. Okay.
Same
So
thing.
kickboards, snowboards, whatever you
Yeah.
call them.
Yeah.
Yep. It's yeah, they'd and that's the thing, unless you've actually been out on a building site or had something fall on your head, you're not going to be thinking about that.
Well, the question you'd want to ask is, why were you underneath the scaffold when there was work overhead anyway? But
Well, how this particular scaff was set up, yep, there's every possibility they'd have to go working right underneath that scaff, which was another problem in and of itself. But
yeah,
yes, they, yeah.
one of the things I've seen lots with, how should I say, construction sites is exactly that, the people working underneath the scaffold when they shouldn't be working underneath the scaffold. And it's okay, well, let's stop, time, plan your work. Plan your work if you have to, or, I mean, have some sort of a signal or whatever that if you have to pass underneath that scaffold. I mean, if the scaffold's fully enclosed and got drop nets and everything else like that, not a problem. I don't care. Because usually you have an enclosed walkway underneath it. That's fine. But if you're not having that, like I've seen that where you have just normal planking, and it's bad enough that they don't have toe boards, but they could also drop stuff down in between and still hit a worker.
Yep.
And I had one foreman say to me once, "Well, that's why we wear hard hats."
Not really, but okay. Yep.
And I said, "Do you realize you have vertebrae in your neck?" And he goes, "Yeah, of course I do." And I said, "Do you realize that they compress and the discs between them can compress and the nerves can get..." um, compacted and everything else like that, impacted. Well, yeah. And I said, so do you realize that when something falls from a height, it gains velocity as it falls? And because it gains velocity, it doesn't really gain weight, but it gains force.
Mhm.
Well, what's your point? I said, that hammer, although it's only 32 ounces, is going to weigh a lot more by the time it hits their head.
Yeah, it's going to have a lot of force in it. And I mean, I'm sure your hard hats aren't too dissimilar to this.
No.
And yep, and that's it. That's not a lot there. Like it's just a little net on my head, and yeah, every bit of that force is going to hit my neck.
Yeah.
So
And that's the problem
maybe,
that people don't realize.
yeah, maybe I'll lose a few newtons or whatever of force from the net breaking, but the rest of it's going to hit me and hurt.
Yeah. Amen to that. Okay, so that kind of wraps up any of the questions, and maybe we'll have more as we're doing Q&A. But let's. Sam asked he'd like to, and if you're still there, Sam, sorry it's taken so long to get to it, but we had some stuff that we wanted to get through first as far as this program goes. But Sam says he'd like to inquire some things that are associated with safety plans.
Hmm.
So this would be an interesting topic for both jurisdictions. So go ahead, Dan, and then I'll weigh in afterwards.
So in Australia, safety plans are very much a do them however you see fit, but get them right. One of those fun little ones. Um, the only thing that is usually legally required is an emergency plan under clause 44 of the regulations. Now, that does not mean that's it. I would say you have to do your own independent risk assessments for your safety plans as to what you're going to include in that.
Mm-hmm.
So for most workplaces, it can be quite simple. It could just be your emergency plans, maybe a drug and alcohol policy, and just a general safety policy. But
Mm-hmm.
as we get into construction, do you have swims in Canada, or what do you have there for site-specific tasks?
Oh, and maybe I can give you a roundabout answer with mine being a bit longer too. And as Sam, this might be really complicated, so I hope you're watching and so forth. But so, like, obviously, your safety program is basically outlining the procedural tasks that you're going to do for those health and safety activities. Um, so, lower on the tier than a safety management system, which is the interaction with all the corporate systems. And so, you may have a working at heights program that's going to talk about everything from working on a step ladder all the way up to swing stages or whatever the case may be, depending on the functions of the organization. Um, and that's a safety program. Now, a safety plan, depending once again in the province and where you are, usually they're required for high risk activities. So, like if you're confined space entry, you're required by law in every jurisdiction in Canada, if you have workers wearing fall protection or using fall protection, to have a fall protection plan. Confined space entry plan. You may have to have a pre-work and work plan for working at heights using a swing stage, whatever. So whenever there's high risk, high consequence activities, they usually require those safety plans by law, by legislation, depending on the province. So, like, say for instance, fall protection plan. You may be having workers who are working, setting up scaffolding, and so it's you're going to identify all of the hazards, and then obviously fall protection, wearing a harness, lanyard, anchor points, etc., are all part of that. And so you're going to have that written into it, but you're going to note anchor points, etc., inspections, and how often you're going to be doing this. But also the other hazards that might creep up that might preclude you from doing that work. Say you get up there, you get setting up your scaffold, you've put up, we'll say 3 tiers. You're working on the 4th one, you've already popped into your anchor points, and you're starting to install everything, and the wind comes up. Well, that should be inserted into that safety plan to say, okay, no, what we do is we disengage and we exit the scaffold and we wait for the wind to go down and you rain, snow, etc. So You'll write a safety plan based on that. Now, Sam, that's what we call a safety plan here. So you might want to call it a pre-work or work plan, a safe work plan, etc. I'm not sure if that's what you were looking for. Did that help you?
Yeah,
Are you still online?
you'd want to get a bit more detail from Sam if we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can give us some more, Sam. And if you're still online, we will do our best to um, answer that question if you give us some more detail. And so, Gregor, did Dan answer all your questions?
No, there's a few there that I haven't answered yet. So
Go ahead
Gregor was
and
asking,
start.
he was saying he's done a certificate 4, which is the second level. You can do a Cert 3 or a Cert 4 in work health and safety. And that's sort of the minimum to get registered in the states that have a registration scheme. And then he's going for his diploma. Would I recommend any others? He wants to go and work in the mining sector, and he's over in Western Australia. So I've done some time in the mines in Australia, so I can actually answer that perfectly. Yes, you definitely want more tickets than your Cert 4 or diploma, especially if you want those good paying jobs in the mines. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you would probably want to be a dual task person, which is not ideal, but it's the only way they'll hire you on some sites. So that might include going and getting a certificate 3 in mines rescue or something like that, so that you could also be part of the mines rescue team if needed. It's but at the very least, your next steps once you've done your diploma, you're going to need to go and get your induction for whatever state or territory you're in. So I did all of mine in the coal mines in Queensland. That's a standard 19. Oh, sorry, standard 11, not 19. Standard 11 is the training you have to do to work in a coal mine in Queensland.
Yeah.
And
And Gregor, just so you know, the this is recorded, so if you want to go back and watch it again and scrub through, that means fast forwarding and dragging the cursor through. And if you miss something, by all means, you can play it again. By all, and it works out better for me because I get more advertising revenue. Um, is there anything else that Gregor should be looking at taking, Dan?
look, once you've got your induction for whatever type of mine you want to get into in whatever state or territory you're looking at, and once you've got some additional training that makes you a more attractive employee, as in you're not just going to be a clipboard clown, and let's be realistic, that's what you're going to get called on the mine site if all you're
Mm-hmm.
doing is health and safety. Uh,
Yeah.
but if you can actually go on and be part of the team, and I find that's better when you can actually go out with the mines rescue boys or the fire team or something like that, and actually go and see parts of the mine site you usually don't get to see and how it really works. So that would be a big one. It is a great career to get into mining as long as you don't have a family or your kids are a bit older, because I think that is the hardest part in Australia, is going and doing 3 or 4 weeks on and 1 or 2 weeks off if you've got young kids. But if you're a single guy and you've got no young kids to worry about, go for it. Earn the best money of your life while you're still young.
Mm. Yeah, good point. Well done. Okay. And then just let me go back up through here because we had another question from. Oh, no, where did he go? Okay, I must have lost it. It was somebody. Oh, yes, there we go. Safety personnel. He's fresher in safety personnel and wants to know how to elevate his career. Um, I'll let Dan weigh in a sec, but from me, what I would say is some of the best things that you can ever do is number one, apply for every single job that you have some experience with. Um, but if you're currently serving and working somewhere, see if you can be on the safety committee, see if you can start in that way, and then take courses because no matter what, um, all organizations look at it from 2 points of view. Number one is, does this person have experience in our field? Does he speak our language? Because and that's the question they ask. Do they know what's going on? Um, or have they got at least experience in a similar industry? And then the next thing is what do you bring to the table? What kind of courses you're taking, etc. Because you still need some credibility. Um, no matter what. I can remember when I started with an employer and they wanted me to pursue. I'm what's called a Canadian Registered Safety Professional. So I've got a designation, I've got letters behind my name, and they wanted me to pursue it. And I never saw a point in it up until that time. And this was back in 2013. So, yeah, 10 years ago. No, this was back in 2007, pardon me. And I never saw any point in it because I didn't think it would add a dime to my wallet. But pretty much everybody got through to me that it brings some credibility to the table, that you've spent the time not only on the job but also in the books learning, and so you have to balance that out. Anything you want to add, Dan?
No, I think what you're saying, I actually just pulled down my purple folder to show that like that is spot on. These are all my various qualifications, which at the time you do them, you think they might not be of any use to you. But as you go through and work in different industries, you absolutely will need them. If you go into the mining sector, like I said, I'm still allowed to go and work on mines because I've done my standard 11. It's just one of those things that you absolutely need as many tickets behind you as you can. I just look at it whenever there's a discounted course and I'm free that day, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Because it's I might have one or two tickets in that binder that I've never used, but the majority of them I've used.
Well, and if your employer wants to give you any training, no matter what you may think of it at the time, take it. I'm qualified to be what's called an RSO here in Canada, a radiation safety officer. A lot of people, you'll see them behind their name. I've seen them in organizations where there's like people have RSO. And why do you have that? Well, I'm a radiation safety officer. What a lot of people don't know is, but with Nuclear Energy Canada, you're only one organization has one or only one or RSO per organization. So my employer wanted me to take it because the organization I was with at the time, there was non-destructive testing, there was medical diagnostic equipment, there's a lot of radiation generating things in the organization. And are you paying for it? Yeah, by all means. Have I used any of it? No.
Yeah,
but no matter what,
done, 2 tickets that I haven't actually used would be motor repairs. I once again had a boss that was willing to pay for me to learn how to do small motor repair, and I think I've got a lot more personal use than professional use out of that. But
yeah,
that's the thing. Absolutely, if your company is willing to pay for it, you might not see the need in it, but one day there might be a need for it.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
It's so no, I think that that's it. If you're wanting to go ahead and start off your career as a safety officer, safety advisor, auditor, whatever you want to call it, getting, even if they seem random, getting qualifications behind you is going to be a big part of that, because a lot of the good safety people I know, they don't go out and get fancy degrees. A lot of the people I know in the aviation space, because they've got all these other qualifications and they've got some industry background, they're just a perfect fit for the role. So they don't need to go and get their master's in occupational health and safety or something like that. But at the same time, sometimes that is a requirement for the role, that you do have a university level of education or a graduate level of education.
Mm. And then all the experience you can get if your boss wants you to be involved in safety inspections, or what we call life safety, like the fire protection inspections here. If they want you to be on the health and safety committee, jump at it, take it, because that's that way to get that foot in the door and get more experience with it. And any kind of experience you can get is good. In the movie, the one of the Avengers movie, Infinity Wars, it was this line came from the character Loki when the villain wanted to go to Earth, and Loki said, "Well, I have experience in Earth." He says, "Well, if you count failure as experience," he goes, "No, I count experience as experience." And to my mind, it's one of the most poignant lines in any kind of movie because exactly it's what I'm talking about. We are a culmination of our experience. And so, no matter what, even bad experiences, poor experiences, disheartening ones, whatever, you will be able to feed back upon those and use them at a later date. So, whatever experience you can get and is offered to you, take it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions, folks? Of course, we have a delay, so we're going to have to wait a little bit for somebody to type. But yeah, because if not, I'll let Dan. It's like a Sunday morning for Dan, so I'll let him be able to have like some a vestige of his day off left, and
I don't get
then
days off. Go on.
yeah, why have days off, right? And then, folks, let us know in the comments if you want to see more of safety compared between the two places, especially those of you in an international audience, because yeah, it might help you if you're deciding you want to move to and you're making a choice: Canada, Australia, Canada, Australia. And I mean, let's be serious.
David?
If you're foreign to both places, we both sound funny.
Yeah, well, David was even saying he's silly enough to think about New Zealand as well.
Yeah, well, there you go. Silly enough. Yeah.
Yeah, they'd Pavlova thieves. Yep. That's it.
Yeah. Well, folks, if there's no more questions, I want to thank everybody that joined. For those of you that are catching this afterwards as a podcast or catching the stream afterwards, feel free to leave more thoughts, comments, etc. And as I said, as soon as I wrap things up, I'm going to put a few links in the description, for one for Dan's LinkedIn and then the other one for the Northern Rivers website. Okay? So, just to close off then, like, do me a favor, understand that you don't have to be a manager, a supervisor, certainly not a CEO or anything like that. You don't even have to be a safety professional. Safety leadership can emerge at any one given time just by doing the right thing in the right place and being that guy or that gal and provoking safety. So whether it be adhering to your rules in your safety program or spotting gaps and bringing it forward to somebody that needs to know about it, by all means, okay? Provoke safety. So anyway, everybody, take care. Thank you once again, Dan, for taking time out of your Sunday, and I look forward to maybe doing this again. And Dan, if you want to hang out, we can have a quick debrief in the control room.
Yeah, we'll have a quick debrief, but thank you very much for joining, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, take care all.